Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first day of reInvent. So we think a lot about scaling technology. Almost every company I talk to is concerned about how their technology will scale. And sometimes we talk about scaling organizations also. So what we don't talk about a lot is how to scale innovation itself. And that's kind of odd if you think about it. Because as your company grows and time goes on and consumers expect new things, if we don't continue to innovate, that's the thing that will really potentially either make or break our company. So today we're going to focus on innovation at scale. If you lead what we call a digitally assertive company, this talk is for you. And by lead, I mean you have some scope over strategy, organization, product development. A digitally assertive company may or may not have been born in the cloud, but it's distinguished by its use of technology in support of customer needs and objectives. And these kind of companies, they adopt technology quickly, and often they scale very rapidly. They get bigger, they get more customers, they need more things, customers expect more. And so these companies really have to grapple with innovation at scale as they get bigger. If, on the other hand, you're in something like a small startup or a very small team, or you're very early in your career and you don't really have the kind of scope to worry about innovation at scale, then you might not get as much out of this immediately. But I'm happy that you're here anyway. Okay, my name is Ann Hunt, and I'm the worldwide leader for digital native business product management at AWS. And what that means is that I talk to digitally assertive companies all over the world. And in particular, I talk to their product leaders. Before joining AWS, I have a little bit more than 20 years of experience in technology. Most of my experience has been in Silicon Valley and on the West Coast, like in Seattle. And I started out as an AI developer, as an individual hands-on developer of AI in the late 90s when you wouldn't even recognize it as the same kind of thing as AI today. So very old school. And then I moved into engineering and engineering management and eventually moved into product management about halfway through my career. That giant bear on the right was a big statue that was put in front of the Ferry Building in San Francisco, and that's a picture of me standing in front of it. And it was meant to remind people of the impacts of climate change. So why I have it there, I think it's a very cool bear, is to remind myself of my favorite Amazon leadership principle. I've been at Amazon for 3 years, and like most Amazonians, I have a favorite. Mine is that success and scale bring broad responsibility. So if you look at this slide, you can see it as kind of a picture of my brain. Half engineering, half product management, and 100% devoted to making sure that the products I work on are good for our customers and for the world. So take that as context in everything that follows. So when we were talking about I was talking to my team about how to talk about innovation at scale. It's such a big topic, and I realized that I needed to break it down into some sort of framework. And what I decided on is to talk about 4 rules, which you could consider my personal tenets for innovation at scale. They're primarily cultural and in nature, but they do map to platform capabilities. So as we go, we'll talk about the cultural aspects, the platform capabilities, and then a roadmap for platform-driven innovation that you can hopefully bring back and will be very practical for you and your teams. When I say platform capability, I mean something that you can build that's actually going to be functionality that your teams can use internally to help them move faster and drive innovation. So a platform capability is a real functionality on your platform. So here are the rules. First, shared customer obsession. Insist on highest standards. Small autonomous teams. and then mechanisms to promote ideas from anywhere. There can sometimes be, and there probably will be, tension between these roles. So if you're a leader, you might think to yourself, if I allow innovation from anywhere within my growing organization, how am I going to insist on the highest standards? Or if I have small autonomous teams, and they really are autonomous, how am I going to make sure that they achieve business objectives? So I'll try to cover some of that as we go. But just know that sometimes tension between roles like this is important because it helps you have those tough conversations in-house, which in the long run will actually help you achieve more in your business. So let's start with shared customer obsession. Not surprisingly, customer obsession is one of Amazon's leadership principles. So on this slide, you see our leadership principles. At Amazon, everyone is a leader, regardless of where you sit in the organization. And what we mean by that is we expect each one of us to lead within whatever your scope is. So these leadership principles apply to all of us. Customer obsession, I think, it's not a surprise. It's listed on the upper left-hand side. To me, it's one of the most important principles, but of course, they're all important. So when customer obsession is shared, what does that mean? That means that all of the teams should have some understanding and knowledge of the customer that they can share. And I think we can make this really practical. To be obsessed with someone is to know them. If you've ever been obsessed with anyone, you probably realize this is true. You want to know everything about them. So at Amazon, when we talk about customer obsession and shared customer obsession, we're talking about a way to actually know our customers. And so you might ask yourself, do you know your customers? And do your teams know the same thing that you know about your customers? So a critical core platform capability that helps drive customer innovation on behalf of customer, is shared customer knowledge. And I would say it's the customer data platform is really critical to this, which is sometimes called a CDP, or customer data platform. So what if everyone in your company could actually build against a CDP that gives them shared customer insights and knowledge? Then they'd be able to move faster and create a coherent experience for customers throughout their touch points in their journey across your brand. Today's consumers don't think personalization or even hyper-personalization is that big a deal. It's important, it's needed, but it's table stakes today. A few years ago, to create personalized experience was amazing and everybody was shocked by it, and oh, these ads are following me around the internet and so on. But now everybody expects that you know who they are and that you give them an experience that shows that you know who they are. If I bought something with your brand, I want you to know that and not try to sell me the same thing over and over again, or send me messages that are just totally irrelevant to my needs. So according to McKinsey, 71% of consumers expect companies to deliver personalized experiences, and at the same time, 76% are more likely to buy or will buy or convert if you deliver them a personalized experience. So this is really important. But let's think about the full end-to-end journey. From the time your consumer or your customer sees your brand in an advertisement, and then they click on it and maybe they come to your webpage and they start exploring the brand, you can already potentially be delivering some sort of personalized experience. And then as they go through the journey of finding products, having products recommended to them, getting them delivered, and then perhaps calling customer support and recommending your product to other people that they know. Throughout this entire life cycle, you can actually create more personalized experiences. And so the key to doing this is to make sure that all of the teams in your company that are working on these different customer parts of the customer journey have access to the same data. So this is something that before I joined AWS, when I worked at several other companies, we really struggled with. because the marketing team might know what the customer had interacted with, and then maybe the front end team didn't know, or the front end team knew, and then we sent them a marketing message and didn't know that they had either opened or not opened that message. And so when the teams across your company don't have shared customer knowledge that's pretty timely and up to date, they really can't do the cool things that consumers are starting to expect. And now you probably are wanting to do things with generative AI to create maybe natural language interactions with your customer. And if you do that, then that needs to be built on a basis of that same customer knowledge. But if every team that's working on this has to reinvent the wheel about your customer, not only will it be a bad experience for the customer potentially, but it'll take a lot longer and it'll really stymie and bottleneck your innovation. Here's an example of a hyper-personalized chatbot in travel. Here the chatbot recognizes the customer's loyalty status and makes a product recommendation based on their preferences. And then it offers a deal or a discount based on what we know about that customer. So you can use hyper-personalization in chatbots or elsewhere in your product and marketing in order to create great experiences. And as it says on the slide, convert support cases to sales opportunity and increase the long-term value of your customers. So now this is a very high-level diagram. I call this sometimes a functional architecture diagram. So what I've done is I've removed all the icons and technical details from a much more complicated diagram that I started with, so you can just see the basics. And in this case, you've got consumers on the left coming in, having interactions with the web or through social media. And then as they're doing that, your consumer data platform is learning about them and storing and processing the information in useful ways so that an AI system can interact with that data. And you can do things like run AI-powered marketing campaigns and create omni-channel communications across that entire life cycle that we looked at before by using the same customer data. So picture multiple product teams using this same basic functionality. And that would be the kind of platform capability that drives innovation among your product and marketing teams. Some of the AWS services there that you should really check out that you could potentially use are, for example, Amazon Personalize, AWS Entity Resolution, Neptune, SageMaker, Bedrock, and of course like Formation and S3. So these are just some of the services that you can use. You can reach out to me after the talk or to your AWS account team and we'll give you a much more detailed diagram. But of course you'll have to customize it for your own situation. Okay, so no obsession with a customer would be complete if we didn't care about the customer's safety and security online. So I just wanted to mention that you could also create a service for your internal teams around fraud so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel on that every time either. And I just pointed out that we have something called Amazon Fraud Detector that could be useful to look at. But the key element here is that your front-end teams, your product teams who are building new features and products, they don't have to worry about these things if they're provided for them as services internally. And they can just work on the experience and trying to achieve customer outcomes. The second principle I want to talk about is insist on the highest standards. Not surprisingly, this is another Amazon leadership principle. So the reason I say not surprisingly is because I think Amazon has done a pretty good job over the many years it's been around at driving innovation at scale and innovating in a lot of different places, a lot of different kinds of businesses. And we think our leadership principles help us do that. And one of them is insist on the highest standards. And I think this is a funny one because it's not necessarily obvious why this one would drive innovation at scale. But I think it does. So I want to start with an example from my life before joining AWS. So I was working with a hyperscale startup. They had created for themselves a homegrown customer relationship management system. And the reason they did that is because they were providing a marketplace between consumers and professionals. And they wanted to use AI to do sort of matching between the right consumers and the right professionals to drive the transactions that they monetized. And this was hugely successful, actually, and was really innovative and cool. And so that startup scaled very rapidly, and then they got purchased by a bigger company, a very digitally assertive type company in the same space. That one had a standard CRM, off-the-shelf customer relationship management team system that was, maintained and extended by a number of overseas teams who were, really good and knew how to work with it. But the homegrown CRM was completely different, and it was, it was very special to maintain. It had all this AI kind of embedded in the logic and so on. And so what ended up happening is that front-end teams and even the AI teams who wanted to get information and data about particular consumers so that they could do models or build new products or whatever, they had to try to join the data from these two different systems all the time. So this was an ongoing bottleneck. Furthermore, the homegrown system was so specialized that and it was so monolithic that you couldn't really divide it up and then create new teams to work on it. So it was one small team, one system, and essentially the entire company was bottlenecked at the pace of innovation of that one team. And so that's something that you really want to avoid going forward. So one company I think is really great on this topic is called ThoughtWorks, and I have the reference there on the slide, if you can get that. ThoughtWorks writes often about technical debt, and they have really great blog posts, I recommend them highly, on how the management of technical debt changes as your company grows from a small startup to medium-sized to, start scaling rapidly and then gets bigger. So at different stages in that process, there are different levels of technical debt that are good. Not all technical debt is bad. In fact, it can be a good thing to take some on when you're building something and you need to move fast. But at some point, different types of technical debt have to be paid down and managed so that you can continue to be an innovative company. Otherwise, you get bottlenecked. So some of the costs of technical debt, if you're a business leader in this conversation, I often speak to business leaders who are very bored by the topic of technical debt. And I think because my brain is half engineering and half product, I'm not bored by it. I'm kind of excited by it. Because if you manage it correctly, you can really create a differentiator for your business. But understanding the business cost is key. But business costs, it can do everything from degrade your customer experience. When customers are reporting bugs and issues, that's a problem. It can lower your profits because you have more to maintain. You might be maintaining older systems, homegrown systems, when there could have been a managed service or something like that you could have used instead. If you can't get your data together and you can't pull your data together like in a CDP or other types of data, then you miss opportunities to monetize that data and to create cool new products using that data, which is something that is often a great opportunity that you can miss. Not least, your good engineers and product managers will get frustrated if they always have to deal with technical debt and they can never fix it and they get stymied by it. So it lowers your talent retention and, of course, also your brand reputation. If you get known as a company that is doing, creating buggy software, that's not good. Okay, so how to fix this? A large part of this is cultural. So you're going to need to, as a business leader and a technical leader, come together and think about strategies to continuously manage your technical debt. So I often see engineers, usually it's engineers, coming and saying, we really want to rewrite this entire system and it's going to take us 6 months. And you won't have any new features while we do that. And I understand the impulse, but that can be a really bad thing to do from a business perspective and from a customer perspective. So you can get pushed into that sometimes if it's really, really bad, but if not, you should just try to implement continuous efforts, continuous refactoring efforts, where the product team really understands what the impacts of the different types of technical debt are, and you prioritize the aspects of the system that are negatively impacting your customers. And then you just slowly pay it down, and some of the technical debt you may never address because it's in a system that's no longer needs to be developed. So a big part of this is aligning each of your teams to customer outcomes, and so that when they're prioritizing technical debt, they're actually prioritizing it according to the customer outcomes. And another part is the tooling, which is where we get into the platform capabilities part of this. So just a few things I wanted to mention here are, for example, feature flagging and version control for managed rollouts, using generative AI tools to identify redundant code and other issues, and then, of course, just emphasizing the technical and business collaboration on the priorities. Calling out a few AWS services like Code Guru, Code Whisperer, Database Migration Service. And a little known fact is that your AWS account teams can actually help you create a roadmap to pay down technical debt. This is something Amazon itself has rather famously done. If you do a few Google searches, you'll find some blog posts on some of the things Amazon did early on to ensure that it did not have a monolithic code base so it could develop rapidly. So we have a lot of information on this, and we can also help you do it inside your own company if you like. Okay, now I'm going to move on to small autonomous teams. So Conway's Law, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, or if not, just says that system design mirrors organization design. So with this, people joke about this a lot, but it's real. So how you're organized will actually impact your system design, and how your system is designed will impact your organization. If a team is spanning multiple software systems that are also spanned by other teams, they end up stepping on each other's toes and getting unhappy, creating more technical debt, and eventually the whole thing will kind of shake down to just mirror the org structure in the end anyway. So I think what this means for you as a leader is that you can't just decide, hey, I'm going to fix our technical debt or create, go away from a monolithic code base and not touch the org structure, because in the end that won't really work. You have to kind of do both at the same time. Loosely coupled teams aligned to loosely coupled software systems is how you optimize for innovation. So at Amazon, teams are not necessarily hierarchical. And what this means is that teams interact with each other, and we try to make it so that one team can use the APIs of another team without having to ask for additional development or get on each other's backlogs. And also, teams are not controlled in a top-down manner, which would create decision-making bottlenecks. So we try to reduce dependencies rather than manage them. So a contrary approach would be something like you might see with the Scaled Agile framework, which is a large framework essentially for managing dependencies and making sure that your team can plan on a quarterly basis exactly what it's going to do. What I've seen that makes happen is that teams start planning to develop certain things. So they start working against outputs rather than trying to work against outcomes, which are customer outcomes. And that really stifles innovation. What you want is for each team to have specific customer outcomes that it's thinking about. And I'll give some examples a little later on. And then they can innovate or do whatever they need to achieve those outcomes. And that just opens everything up. They can use whatever technology, they can develop what they need to achieve those outcomes. And ideally, if they don't have to ask anybody else, they can do it fast, experiment with it, learn about their customers, stay close to their customers, and create things that the hierarchy might never have thought of. So think about innovation happening at the edge, not at headquarters. Okay, so a key part of this, teams being close to their customers, is that the team owns the entire life cycle of the system that it's developing. So starting, we always start with the customer and work backwards from the customer need to what we're going to develop. What that means is we start with customer vision and need, and then the team works on product planning and development, manages the product portfolio, handles any experiential sort of potential conflicts with other adjacent products or features, launches, operates, and observes and iterates on that product over time. So as they try something and it does or does not work, they learn about their customer and they're staying close to the customer. So when you talk to an Amazon team of engineers and product, not only does product know who the customer is and what the customer needs are, engineering knows who the customer is and what the customer's needs are. So the entire team is responsible to deliver on customer objectives, not just the product team or just the manager or something like that. And by doing that, you really get a lot of passion and innovation around trying to help those customers. Okay, so here's an organizational design. Going back to the CDP, you might have one or more teams that are maintaining that consumer data, and we like to think of those teams below, like consumer data teams, as product teams. So they're creating data as a product for the other teams to use. Their customers are the internal teams, and they have product outcomes to make it easier for the internal teams to use that data, for example, to make it easy for internal teams to experiment safely without exposing data in an inappropriate way. The consumer data teams would be responsible for that. And then the front-end teams, starting on the left, might have, these are just some random examples, they might have some customer outcomes like customers can onboard seamlessly, customers see value within the first hour of using the product. A marketing team might have an objective like customers receive relevant marketing information throughout the journey. And an AI team who's also working against the same consumer data would be trying to create insights that are accurate, astute, in real time for the other teams to use. So in this way, these teams can work more or less independently against the same customer data. And the organization design follows the system design so that the small teams are working on small systems. Okay, so here's another one of these high-level functional architecture diagrams showing a conversational chatbot as a service. A lot of companies want their customers to interact with conversational chatbot. That's very popular these days. Here's a pattern for implementing a generative AI-powered chatbot. Using RAG is retrieval augmented generation, within the context of a search app experience. So one of those front-end teams might be the one creating the search app that the consumers are interacting with, and it can implement the chatbot when the chatbot can reach out to the identity center to know who the customer is and what kind of data they're actually empowered to see or have the permissions to see. And the plugins, can provide the chatbot with the different types of data or different data sources. So by implementing it this way, you could spin up more of those front-end teams, and they would all be using potentially the same chatbot in different ways. But then the customer, so I've been asked a lot of times by teams, how can I make sure that all my product teams who are exposing a chatbot are giving a customer a coherent experience across the different parts of the product? And it would be something like this. And as usual, I've listed a few AWS services like Amazon Q Business, which can provide LLM-based chatbot for you and you can. It's a low-code solution. You can use RAG with it. So that's worth checking out. And then a few others like the IAM, Identity Center, API Gateway, and CloudFront, for example. Okay. So here's a real example. This is a startup that I work with sometimes, AWS customer, of course, called Bolden. They do retirement planning, either directly to consumers, so you can go in there and set up your own retirement plan, or to enterprises where it can be white labeled. And they do something very similar to the chatbot example in terms of creating a financial projection engine that's AI powered and letting the front-end product teams interact with that so that you get a consistent experience and a correct experience. The chief data architect gave me a quote. He said, front-end teams can create new features without having to ask for new development on the financial projection engine. So this is really key to allowing all of the teams to move independently. So I've worked with a lot of customers. I think I mentioned in my 3 years at AWS, I work with customers all over the world, and it's safe to say that everyone acknowledges the power of generative AI, and most are working to build and deploy some type of Gen AI experience for their customers. Most people want to focus on the LLM itself, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So what's most important, or what's important first as a foundation, is to get your data right. So we've already talked about CDPs, data as a product, governance, and different types of compliance protection as a product for internal teams to use so that they can innovate quickly. And so that sort of data foundation and generative AI capabilities as platform capabilities that different teams can use is what helps you enable your small autonomous teams to innovate at the edges. So think about these things: team and architecture cohesion, API-driven design, data as a product, and then AI-powered capabilities also as products. Okay, this is the final principle for innovation that I want to talk about, which is mechanisms to promote ideas from anywhere. So a mechanism is a special word we use at Amazon for a complete, repeatable process. So you can think of something as like the scientific method as being a mechanism. It's a repeatable process. So when you run an experiment, other scientists can run the same experiment and potentially get the same results. So a mechanism is similar to that. It has well-defined inputs and outputs, tools. It has a way for teams to adopt it, so onboarding materials, and ways for everyone to inspect it and give feedback so you can improve the process over time. So when you have a company that has, think like thousands, hundreds of thousands, or more employees, it's really important that not every new employee that's hired and every new team that's spun up has to reinvent the wheel. It's much better if they have a mechanism for doing specific things that they all have to do. And so we spend a lot of time designing these and making sure that other teams can use them. So one of the mechanisms we have for innovation, we take innovation really seriously, innovation at the edges really seriously. And so, of course, we created a mechanism that teams all over the world can use to drive innovation. And we call it working backwards, where you start with the customer who's in the center, and you describe potential, who is the customer, what do they need, the potential solution to their need in terms of a press release. And the reason it's a press release is because it shouldn't say anything about implementation or the internals of the system at all. It just says what you'd see in a press release, which is who are the customers, how they can use it, what benefits they're going to get out of it. So we write a press release and then we follow it up with a frequently asked questions or a facts section, which goes a little bit more into exactly how it'll work, and potentially visuals so you can really picture what this new solution is. And this is a living document. So the way this mechanism works is that if you have just been hired at Amazon and you live somewhere far, far away from headquarters, and you have what you think is the most amazing idea to help a certain group of customers, you can write a press release and then start developing a frequently asked questions and visuals for it. And you can actually promote that to your manager and their manager and other stakeholders and team members across the world. You can start getting feedback. And you can, of course, and should be, of course, also doing customer discovery along the way, putting mock-ups in front of customers, talking to customers, and so on, so that you can develop and grow this FAQ. And then eventually, over time, as you start getting indicators that maybe you do a pilot, you get a small investment, you do a pilot, and then you get more indicators that it's going to work, you can start getting investment from your leadership to scale. And I've literally seen someone in my own team do this and go all the way up to, our CEO and get funding for a really big, what is now a global program that she started developing as a frequently asked questions PR FAQ document about two and a half years ago, piloted and got investment. So it doesn't happen for every idea, of course, but there is a specific way that you, no matter who you are in the company, can try to promote and test and find out if your solution idea will work. And by having a mechanism for it, we capture so many great ideas that otherwise would just be forgotten over time. So part of that, everybody knows about the working backwards process. If you look up Amazon working backwards, you could probably find a lot online about this. But internally, we have a startup-like funding method to accelerate these experiments. And this is really key to it because first you write it down and test it, but then we have to have a mechanism also to invest in the right things and grow them so we can create things that are really think big ideas that might impact everybody around the world. And in a good way, we hope. So this is part of it as well. So just before, coming to AWS, I actually worked in a company that kept saying, how do we get our teams more innovative? Should we have hack days? Should we have hackathons? Should we do this? Should we do that? And I think, the key is that they had no mechanism. People had plenty of ideas, and we had hackathons. But what was the mechanism for making sure that it got investment and built into a real product after the hackathon was over? It's kind of ad hoc. So here's Jeff Bezos. Since the outcomes of all these things are uncertain, if you can figure out how to conduct an experiment, you can make more bets. So the key is reducing the cost of the experiments. And then he mentioned we have a group called Web Lab that is constantly experimenting. This was an interview with the Harvard Business Review in 2007. Since then, Web Lab is no longer just, I wouldn't really call it a group. I would call it more of a platform capability because thousands and thousands of people can run thousands and thousands of experiments every year without stepping on each other's toes or creating poor customer experiences, and they can get the right information that they need to make decisions at scale. So when you're thinking about customer discovery and experimentation, I always tell the teams I worked with that there's two major aspects to this. One is qualitative or anecdotal, which is go talk to the actual customers and find out what they're saying. And then the other one is at scale, like large-scale A/B or multivariate testing. If you bring those two things together, you have a really powerful way to understand what customers need and what solutions are working for them. So, and I've just put a few of our partners along the bottom, Split, Launch Darkly, and User Testing, that do different things that can be really useful for you to add into your platform capabilities for your internal teams to use. But think about mechanisms to promote innovative ideas, so it's not just ad hoc. Create mechanisms to ensure that teams can talk to customers, like actually have those conversations. That's the qualitative discovery. And then create, if you can, self-service experimentation at scale capabilities in your platform. Okay, so now I've just taken all the rules that I've talked about and mapped them to all of the capabilities I talked about and put it all on one slide. So shared customer obsession, think about CDPs, data as a product. Insist on the highest standards. Think of continuous refactoring, modular extensible design in your systems, continuous refactoring, ensuring that the business and technical side come together and understand the importance of doing this. Autonomous teams are helped out by having API-driven designs, modular and cohesive architectures, modern data architecture, governance, and then mechanisms to promote ideas from everywhere. Mechanisms for customer discovery, and some of those can actually be platform capabilities as well, and self-serve experimentation. Okay, so in the last few minutes, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I would do if I were going back with you to your team and trying to decide how do you actually implement or execute on this. Okay, so there's a lot of words on this slide, but I always start with data. Do you have a customer data platform? And do you treat data as a product for your internal teams? Then, in terms of the highest standards, I look for problem systems, and I've literally done this at companies where I've been a product leader before. So I did that at one company by sitting with customer support. Actually, I've done this at several companies, and just listening to customer support calls and the things that customers are complaining about, reviewing customer reported bugs and looking for patterns, and you can find some pretty amazing patterns that will tell you which parts of your platform are problematic and keep causing issues for everyone. So look for those problem systems. And then help your team prioritize continuous refactoring and refactoring along the lines of stuff that is driving customer outcomes. So prioritize that work just like you prioritize all your work. And cloud native architectures as well, where you're using managed services and things like that, and you're not having to spend all your time in operational work. Then as you start doing these things and you start thinking, okay, we found some problem systems, we need to refactor them, we might be dividing things up, think about changing your organization structure to match your system structure. And, I know this is hard, but if you can get small autonomous teams and team and architecture cohesion, then you'll be driving a lot more innovation as you scale, and you won't be bottlenecked at a certain size. Finally, experimentation platform and the mechanisms to go along with it are really key. I absolutely I would be delighted if every single one of you reached out to me after this talk and connected with me on LinkedIn or sent me an email, whatever works. I love to talk to teams about what they're working on, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to say or feedback to make it better. Things you disagree with, that'd be great as well. Thank you.